Welcome to the Money to Meaning podcast, where we explore ways to bridge the gap between money and our heart's desires. I'm your hostess, Amy Adler, and today I'm really excited. I have with me attorney and spiritual leader and coach, Nik Sallie. Welcome. Nik, how are
Hi,
you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. So we'll just jump right in. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do, both for your legal and your spiritual slash coaching business, and maybe your why as well, why you do those positions.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Nik Sallie. I am the managing attorney of Tastemakers Legal PLLC in Austin, Texas. And my firm really focuses on helping founders, specifically those who identify as women, BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color, and queer founders to protect their brand through trademark registrations. I really wanted to make sure that those more, I suppose, marginalized communities had the type of legal protection and support that they needed. And so, are my clients people who identify in all different ways? Yes, they are. But my focus has been on making sure that those particular um, identifying people also have that type of protection. The other firm that I have is Malachite and Moon Consulting LLC. And within that firm, I do executive coaching for high achieving women who are like me, which means they're professional and spiritual. And so the reason that I have both of these firms is that the law firm necessitated having the coaching firm. Anytime I talk to a business owner about trademarks, we always go into business coaching. It's just kind of par for the course because I'm helping them to understand what their business needs to have set up in order to successfully get the trademark registration. And then that turns into personal coaching. So that's kind of how they're tied together. Someone who needs legal help, I can do that in Tastemakers Legal, but when they need coaching about their business or their life, I do that over at Malachite and Moon, and it kind of we both serve that client. My why is simply because I have been in corporate for over like 25 years, working in tech and working in entertainment and things like that. And I really found that this movement of bringing your whole self to work was a little bit performative at times because people they just want their lawyer to be a lawyer. Sometimes they find out, my lawyer does trademarks and tarot. It's a thing of how are they going to feel about that? And I can talk about that later. But I didn't want to break myself apart anymore into these little pieces. I wanted to be whole, and I wanted to present myself whole and basically say, you either take me as I am or leave me. And so it was really a matter of putting my whole self out there and attracting clients who appreciated that.
I love that. And I love that you're doing it in a way that's more invitational than like in your face, because you're still offering this legal business for people who might not
Yeah,
quite be awake yet, but then you're also offering this other opportunity for those who are ready for it as
right.
well. So I love that. It's awesome. So I know I experienced challenges in the finance profession working alongside people who are not yet spiritually awake. So I'm curious about what it's like for you being a spiritually awake professional in the legal field where our colleagues are just not there yet for the most part. And have you found other awakened attorneys like you in your search,
You know,
in your
I
networking?
I found a few, but it's been very few and far between. More or so, I think I don't want to say that we're hidden necessarily, but I think there has to be a conversation around intersectionality, which is women are basically told that we have to be one thing. You need to focus on one thing, don't be too much. But I think that there's an added layer of complexity when you're a Black woman as well, as far as bringing your whole self to work. And so I know we're out there. I know there are nurses and doctors and accountants and other lawyers who are also spiritual and um, you know, are in connection with their ancestors and maybe like tarot or astrology. But I've not come across very many lawyers who do, just a handful. More so, it's the coaches, the
Yeah.
coaches who are a little bit more open and I suppose transparent around it. But I've come across the coaches, but also people in the medical field, and I think that that's just also par for the course because they understand the mind body connection as well. So
Hmm.
you've got your chiropractors, and you've got those types of folks who are more leaned in and tuned in to spirituality than some others.
How is it then interacting with some of those other legal folks who are just not there yet?
I think for someone like me who's intuitive and
Hmm.
empathic, I'm able to kind of tell pretty quickly if someone's open to something. And I'm also very open myself where I don't shy away from asking the questions because I want to make sure people are comfortable. And I've not had any kind of conflicts or anything like that. It's just a matter of our conversations really do stick to the black letter law. We really are talking about, okay, the Lanham Act says this, and this is what we need to do for this trademark and this international trademark that. We're talking about case law, and when we talk about personal things, we're talking about our families. But we don't necessarily veer off into the conversations of spirituality, which is totally fine. At the end of the day, we're all human beings, and I think we have our own
Hmm.
challenges and we also have our own joys. And I think we
Hmm.
connect around those things that make us happy and those things at least that are interesting to us. So my overall interactions with people who may not be as spiritual as me, pretty positive, but
Hmm.
also not as our conversations aren't as colorful as maybe the conversations with the folks who are interested in the tarot and astrology and numerology and things like that. But it's been just fine.
That's good. Yeah, I think my experience has been similar in the finance and accounting space. Although I will say that for the 25 years in corporate that I was also, so you and I have similar
Mm-hmm.
histories in different industries. The 25 years or so I was in the corporate world, it felt almost that I had to be somewhat inauthentic because I couldn't be open about some of the things that I believe in
Mm-hmm.
and the reality of the world in which we live, in my opinion, from my perspective. And so that made it hard because I think that was really ultimately what made me leave the corporate world, which was intentional. I'm sure that was part of my spiritual path, a growth
Yeah.
path, but it was hard being in it, being immersed in it, and feeling constrained and having to hide parts of myself.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, working in tech for so long, I there might be a little bit of nuance there. I came from entertainment, so I worked for EMI Music Marketing, which is they own Virgin and Capitol Records. It's how I started my career, working with different artists, like supporting Janet Jackson, Lenny Kravitz, or Paul McCartney, those types of artists. And I did that in Dallas. And so, kind of, artists are creatives. And so it's not unheard
Yes.
of for someone to have different beliefs there. But that made me interested in entertainment law, and definitely intellectual property. And so when I went and I did global intellectual property at a global tech firm, yeah, it's science based, it's social sciences, it's legal, it's all that kind of stuff, but it's still tech. So there was a little bit of like the people's personalities being eccentric that was mixed in with it. So I had crystals on my desk. I
Oh,
had
that's
I
good.
had
So
a
they
little
don't mind.
I had a little sage spray on my desk. I was like, hey, if you got some bad energy, come by my desk and just spray yourself down real quick. But I had little tokens around me that kind of pointed to my belief system, but I was not by any means the person who had a megaphone and was like announcing things because again, I'm there to do a job. I wasn't really there. Yes, you want to be friendly with people, but also it's like I need separation between work and my home life. So I didn't really make a lot of friends at work. I had a very core group of like a small group of friends from work that I felt I could trust. But besides that,
Hmm.
I wasn't like broadcasting to the entire department what my beliefs were either. And so I understand where you're coming from. You're like, this feels inauthentic. It was a little bit constrained. I feel you on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It's great that you had such a good experience, though, that it didn't feel so constricting to you as much being in those industries, which, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Entertainment and tech are definitely more of the eccentric personalities. So it's a great place to be. So, do you incorporate any spiritual practices into your legal business work? And if so, like, do you talk about that with your clients? Like, practices in getting to know your clients using some spiritual tools and techniques, or anything else?
That's a really interesting question. So I think overall, as someone who is intuitive and empathic, like I don't necessarily turn that off. So
Yeah.
I'm always a coach and I'm always a light worker. And so whenever I'm working with somebody, I'm not just their lawyer, I am their business partner, like a temporary business partner in some ways, where I am trying to help them understand where there might be gaps, not just legal gaps, but operational gaps, and then also maybe even emotional gaps. Like, what is your mindset as you go through this process and as you are explaining to me that you're afraid someone's going to steal your intellectual property? What are the limiting beliefs behind that that are driving your actions right now and driving you to make certain decisions? Because I also can and kind of see down the road, so I can see like 10 steps ahead sometimes. And if I can see that someone has a certain belief or behavior, I understand that's going to probably put it's going to put a monkey wrench in something I'm trying to do for them.
Mhm.
And so I'm trying to head them off and say, we might need to take care of this mindset before we move forward with these other things, because if we don't, it's going to make these next 3 steps much more difficult than they need to be. In other words, I'm not going to fight with you about certain things. Like, if we're going to agree that these are the best things for your business and you're paying me to execute on these things, let's be in agreement and move forward smoothly. Like, it doesn't have to be painful. So in that way, I'm always coaching. I do not use certain practices when I'm doing my legal work. But what I do is I have on the coach hat at that
Mhm.
point in time. And so I'm always looking for ways to alleviate stress for my clients and to help them reframe certain thought processes that are maybe negatively impacting them as a leader in their company. And I try to remove roadblocks. So that in and of itself is just personal and professional development work, right? Now, having said that, on the coaching side, so not Tastemakers Legal, but Malachite and Moon Consulting, when I am coaching and it does involve spiritual things like that, I first check in with my coaching clients and ask them, are you okay with me including Reiki? Reiki energy healing in our sessions. Are you okay with me pulling a tarot card or something like that for you, or suggesting crystals for you that can support what you're doing? And if they say no, then I won't. And if they're
Mhm.
open to it, then I know to kind of go up to another level and be more tuned in, where I'm allowing myself to get intuitive hits and hints around what they need. So even before I get on a call with a coaching client, I may sit and meditate for 5 to 10 minutes and just kind of feel into what's going on. And I can sometimes feel someone's anxiety before I meet them, or I can feel their sadness before I meet with them. And then I'll pull crystals that correlate to, okay, if I feel like there's a lack of self-worth, then we're pulling rose quartz for self-love, that it represents self-love. Or I may already have pulled 3 tarot cards for them before I speak to them, and then there's a message that comes through for that. So I always check in with the client to see, what do you need, what do you resonate with, and what is your preference? How do you want to be supported? Because as the coach, it's my job to set a framework and a container, but it's their job to fill in the middle,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like, we
Yes.
customize, we co-create over here.
Which, I mean, every two human interaction is doing the same thing. It's just that
Exactly.
you are more aware of that happening, which is beautiful. I wish that more professionals in the legal industry would approach their work from the same point of view and perspective, because what I see in my work, I mean, I work with people going through divorce. So I work
Right.
with a lot of family law attorneys and even small business attorneys dealing with their fraud investigations and things like that, or small business divorce. And I see them getting so caught up in the inefficiencies and like not quite really understanding what's underlying the things that they're arguing about or what they're
Hmm.
fighting for, and not really understanding the person well enough to see that it's really just them, a reflection of them,
Yeah, yeah.
and
I
so it would
think
be great
that
to save a lot of money and time in the industry if more attorneys would be able to start using their intuition and or connecting more with the human that they're helping.
I agree with you on that. I think something that came up for me while you were sharing that is really around what area of law you're in.
Yeah.
So I feel like family law attorneys are really good at this, even though you were just saying, about divorce attorneys. I think the family law attorneys, especially the ones who have to deal with children, are probably way more intuitive or empathic or softer, like the soft skills are engaged a lot more. However, if you're someone who's dealing with tax law, maybe, you're in the numbers all day and you don't have to be so soft around the edges. And it's just like, okay, what's the case? Are we going to litigation? Are we not? Do we need to do a deposition? So it's very much like laid out more plainly where they don't have to do all the client facing interactions or they don't see the value in kind of approaching the practice. Their bedside manner doesn't need to change in that situation. So this is just the thing. This is Hollywood at this point. This is the media. Whenever you see a show about lawyers, it's always about litigators. It's never
Yeah.
about someone like me who's transactional and behind the scenes. I am at
Right.
my desk reviewing contracts. I am on the phone with the
It's not
client.
sexy enough to make it on TV.
Yeah, it's like they just want you to be in the courtroom fighting somebody. And so I'm just
Right.
like, I'm not trying to fight. I'm trying to save you money. I'm trying to basically keep you out of court. So, um, unfortunately, the media portrays any worthy litigator, any worthy lawyer as someone who's simply a litigator who wants to fight. Lawyers are often portrayed as someone who wants to argue, who wants to debate. I don't want to do any of those. I'm especially not going to argue with you if you're not paying me. But at the same time,
Amen.
it hits the thing of I just want to I want to help people have a very clear pathway as much as possible in their business from where they are to where they want to be, from whatever product they want to launch to the actual revenue streams being established and them getting the money and then them establishing generational wealth. That's what it's really about. Intellectual property is a pathway and a doorway to generational wealth, especially for those marginalized communities I mentioned. And so I want to keep people out of litigation because it's so costly. And so I think for me, because I'm more client facing and I'm not client facing in terms of being in court, I just have a different bedside manner where I am much more soft and nurturing and like a partner to people. Because I always tell them, you're the boss. We will do what you want to do up to a certain point. And then, if they're not listening, then I have no qualms about firing clients, again, that don't listen. So,
Hmm. Yeah. If it's not a good fit because they're not getting the message, then why continue beating your head against the wall?
I'm not going to help you harm your business or yourself.
Yeah. Right. It's great. The only thing that I'll say in response to that is actually, in my experience, a lot of family law attorneys don't have that sense of softness that you were
Wow.
describing. It has been very disheartening to me, especially those who end up litigating a lot in court, but really a lot of family law attorneys, because the legal system, it is broken and
Mm-hmm.
it's very slow, and judges can decide things based on how they feel like. And so it's really hard for an attorney to navigate this legal field that's very squishy. And right, because the law has some language, but then there's so much flexibility within that language for judges to decide how they want to rule on things, because every family is a snowflake, every person is
Mm-hmm.
different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good that the law has that flexibility, but it makes things really hard for the attorneys to really to fully support their clients. And so after years of doing that, I think that they're becoming less soft and more jaded about the system and about their work. And it shows. Now, that's not to say all family attorneys are like that. That's not at all what I'm saying, because there are some that really are great at being the softer, being more
Mm-hmm.
intuitive and connecting with her, especially those who are fighting for children's rights and
Right.
domestic violence cases. Those kinds of things are very emotional. But yeah, a lot of those high net worth cases, the finance only cases, are just, yeah, it's just the same thing, the same kind of attorney reaction to a business, a in-house counsel kind of attorney approach.
Wow.
So
So they are
yeah,
jaded. That's really they've
yeah,
maybe they came in bright eyed and bushy tailed at one point. They were They were like, we can do this. And then at some point, it's like, okay, this is a lot. And if you think it's just them protecting themselves, like putting up a wall.
Yes, yes, I do think so. It's a response, like a trauma response, I think. But I also think that there's in a lot of the larger firm environments, especially the firms that are all family law, but also the firms that do all kinds of law practice for client service, there's so much pressure for the billable hours that they become less focused on helping the clients and more focused on billing the number of hours that they need to bill in order to keep their jobs, to get the bonus, to get the promotion, all the things to take care of themselves. And they end up overlooking the benefits that clients really need from them in order to focus on themselves. So it's really unfortunate. It's sad to me. It's hard to be a finance expert in that world, watching people's money drain
Yeah.
because the attorneys are they'll file motions in court just to try to administratively burden the other side out of the divorce process so they have to give in and give up.
Hmm.
I know that doesn't happen as much in the corporate world, especially when money isn't as much of an issue, but definitely in the individual family world, it does. And it's sad to watch.
Definitely a strategy that's employed. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I don't go to court.
I do not blame you one bit. I hate court so much. I don't have to go very often, thankfully, but when I do, ugh, it's not a pretty day.
Mm.
So, where do you see the legal profession in general going as society is becoming, in general, society is becoming less tolerant of these controlling systems that we've been navigating, like our government and our banking and investments?
Yeah, I've been giving this quite a bit of thought from both sides of like being someone who is a legal practitioner, but also being someone who sits at the cross section of multiple identities. And for me, in a nutshell, I think it's going to have to get to a point where people are going to have to understand that just because something is quote unquote legal doesn't make it ethical.
Yeah.
And we've had examples of that in the past, you know, with slavery and other things, and you know, women not being able to vote until a certain time, and then also things like for the longest time, women not being able to have a bank account without their husband's permission and things like that. Just because something is written down and it's the black letter law doesn't mean that it's actually right, moral, ethical, or good for society. It doesn't necessarily advance society. What it does is it protects individuals who want to oppress. And I think it's not that we're going to have to get to a point, we're already there, we're past the point. I think people are going to have to very much do some soul searching and decide when it's time to be quote unquote disobedient. And I think the conditioning we have through media, through religion, through other things, it's going to take a lot of work for some people to see that, because I think that one part of conditioning is whatever you're taught it in a way that it makes you so certain of it that you don't have to think for yourself. You don't have to do any critical thinking. You're just like, this is the answer. This is what I'm supposed to choose. This is easy. And this is what I'm going with. And you're also shamed if you start to question and want to dig into different layers of what you've been taught. And so that combination is a very dangerous, I think, is a dangerous combination that makes people maybe not willfully ignorant at first, but I think that's where it goes. I think people become willfully ignorant and they just want to put their heads in the sand. So, those of us, though, who have been taught to critically think because we're in the legal profession or we're in some other um, academic profession or something like that, I think maybe what we have to do is be the people who lead and model for others um, what righteous anger looks like, what equity actually looks like. I think there's a really great saying. Excuse me. I can't remember exactly how it goes, but equity to the oppressor, looks like a burden. It's something like that, where if you are so used to everything being part of your privilege, the moment someone else gets equity, you become threatened. And you see that as you being oppressed. And that's not true. So I think that what we really have to look at is, in the midst of all of the fear mongering and the news and things like that, how do we get people to pause and actually start to critically think? Then, how do we get them to have aligned action that protects themselves and others? Because I think people are just mostly scared.
Hmm. I
And I don't
agree.
know what your take is on it.
I mean, I think that's a really helpful response. Yeah, I think people are really scared. I think people don't feel like they have options for ways out of the pains that are caused by a lot of these broken controlling systems. You brought up some of them: media, religion. They're afraid that if they step outside the bounds of what their religion says, that their family and friends won't accept them anymore, and that's a big fear. And if they step outside and politically, or in the media, that they won't be informed, or that they will make uninformed decisions, or that they will make bad decisions, whatever, or that they just will be seen as being dumb because they're unaware of what's happening.
Mm.
I think it's really it's always, it always comes down to some fear of the reaction of others, and a lack of self-empowerment, and feeling that standing firm in their own power is the best path forward from every individual's standpoint.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's really about fears of abandonment and isolation as
Mm-hmm.
well. And so I think, again, it's a thing where people have to realize, we talk a lot about being on the right side of history, but everybody has a different definition of what's right.
Yeah.
And I've just really been thinking, as a woman and as a Black woman, there's so many things that are kind of lobbed against us, and like what we're attacked for and things like that. And the exhaustion is real. But at some point you have to just make up your mind and say, you know what? This isn't right. And I'm not going to follow this. And I'm not going to enforce this in my home. And I'm not going to, whatever it is, because the power, and this is the spiritual side that comes out, but I do believe that a lot of our power is, how do I say this? It's managed or is housed through our attention. So
Mm-hmm.
they say basically, energy flows where your attention goes. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're focused on, there's a recession and there's not enough money and things like that, then your attention is fueling that, and the body follows the mind. So your behavior will start to reflect what you believe, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So this is an oversimplification, but usually the solution is, let's not pay attention to that. This is why I don't watch the news. Let's not
Yeah.
pay attention to that. And some people will get up in arms. Okay, just because I don't think about it or don't pay attention to it doesn't make it go away. No, it doesn't, but it weakens it. It weakens it. And then we're taking our attention and focusing it on something positive, which is a solution. That energy now builds up on the side of the solution versus the side of the problem. And so I think getting people to shift from being inundated with the problems to now being obsessed with finding the solution and putting their attention and energy there is the macro level solution to a lot of things that we experience.
100% agree with you. Absolutely. That's, and very well said. I love that. So, shifting topics just slightly, why did you decide to start your own business? And what do you love about it rather than the corporate legal world?
Yeah, so my mom is an entrepreneur, and I think I was just really influenced by her owning her own business and like, um, home decor and things like that. And so it really spoke to me as a creative. And when I went to law school, it really wasn't so much about the business aspect of it as it was about protecting myself as a business owner, as a future business owner, but also protecting other business owners. And I think I'm someone who's different where I'm not interested in just one thing. I'm multifaceted, I'm multi-passionate. And so even having one business wasn't enough for me. And so really going out on my own was my love letter to myself of like, listen, corporate has been something else, girl. Like this is corporate has its challenges. Now we can stack the deck in our favor if we go out on our own. Entrepreneurship is hard. And yes, you're your own boss, but your clients are also in a way the boss. But I will tell you that the stresses that I might encounter in my own business are nothing compared to the stress that I had in corporate and the number it did on my immune system and self-esteem and self-concept and things like that. And as hard as it might be, even financially sometimes, to be an entrepreneur, I would much rather do this and have the autonomy that I have than to be in corporate spaces that are really built on abuse. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying every corporate space is like that. That's why I put that qualifier in. There are some corporate spaces that really do put people first and it's people over profit. But I think that
Mhm.
that's few and far between. And so, really, having my own business was about me stepping out on faith and believing in myself, but also believing in a higher power that would carry me through. Yeah.
Beautiful. And your interesting point about the corporate environment reminds me of the point that we're not just voting with our casted votes, that we're also voting with our money as we're investing in corporations, and that we have the ability to choose to support organizations that treat their employees well, that are doing good in the world, whatever, and to choose not to support those that are just focused on bottom line profits and will hurt anybody in the way of that.
Yeah, and I think that is a really important part. I think what I would add to that is what's unfortunate is that with, again, the media, we are so inundated with certain things to keep us distracted that a lot of us don't, our mindset is not of one that includes empowerment around our dollar.
Right.
And
Right.
so we're literally having to learn in real time, like, oh, I can vote with my money. I can vote with my dollars by not supporting. And again, this is where media plays a big part in this because a lot of my things or news that I do consume is from TikTok. And so when you see certain things around DEI initiatives being rolled back and then the public's response to that and things like what's happening with Target and lawsuits and and people who have decided I will not shop at Target. I will go right over to Costco or someone else. That media teaches the younger generation, oh, I can I can actually do that. I do have power here, and I can vote with my dollars, and I actually have a say in what happens. This is not just like, oh, I can go buy a bottle of water or something like that, and that's just what it is. No, people are they're digging deeper. Like they want to know where their food comes from. They want to know what the corporation stands for. They want to know, all these things now, and I think that's wonderful because anyone who says business is not personal, I think that's a lie. I think that is something that is just being used to allow people in business to be cutthroat and abusive to each other. Business is all personal because people are involved. It is always personal.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes, it is only
Always.
personal.
Yes.
Yeah,
Can't be
that's such
anything
an
but that.
interesting. Right. Right. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions that I ask all of my guests here to wrap us up.
Sure.
Um, how do you interpret the meaning of the podcast title, Money to Meaning? Like, what does that mean to you when you hear it?
It's funny you ask that because I think if, someone who studied sociology in undergrad, I may not consider myself a social scientist, but I often think about the science of meaning and why one thing means something to someone else, but means something different to another person, or belief. Why, if I say the sky is blue, one person believes it and the other person's like, no, it's actually red, you know? But money to meaning for me is, I think it points people to not the duplicity, but the multifaceted nature of money. And I think it gives people permission to explore that. I think it gives people permission to have their own definition of what money means, but also to decide for them how money makes them feel and to reframe their relationship with money on their terms. And instead of just being handed a definition, it gives us the opportunity to recreate a definition that serves us in whatever way. For me, I am grappling with this new, not so new, but new in my life kind of term that money doesn't actually exist. Money is energy. That's a
Mhm.
complete reframe because when you grow up, your parents are teaching you how to count coins and dollar bills and things like that. And as you get older, and you're in college and you start hearing about money as energy, and that's why we call it currency and these things. Those types of definitions really opened my mind up to thinking about money and prosperity as a whole in a different way. So I love the title that you've chosen. It's very
Thank you.
expansive.
Yes, thank you. It feels very expansive and along the lines of what you just shared. I recently had kind of a revelation that I see the exchange of money as being an expression of gratitude.
Hmm.
That whoever I'm paying, I'm expressing my gratitude to that organization, person, whatever, for providing me with the goods or service that I
Yeah.
received, that I'm blessed enough to receive, and thankful that they have the service or good that I needed or wanted. And when I was able to shift my focus to thinking about it in that way, I felt so much less anger and frustration and even fear
Hmm.
around it, that it was like, oh, yeah. Like, no, I don't love paying my electric bill every month, especially when the rates keep going up. But I am really thankful that I have air conditioning in Texas in the summer. Right. And so I'm going to pay
Exactly.
that bill with a lot of gratitude that I don't have to sweat to death in July. So, you know?
Same exact experience, paying the light bill, paying the rent and all the little things that go along with that, like trash pickup and all these other amenities. I am grateful for it, and it just changes my relationship with the bill. And I don't know if you get this, but I'm getting notifications on my phone all the time. Emails. As soon as you pay the bill, they send you another one. As soon as you pay it, they're sending you another notice like, oh, well, here's your next bill. That's due for next month. They already give you the thing, and I'm just like, swipe. Thank you. Thank you. I don't want to see that right now, but thank you because you're providing me a service that I really appreciate. It does take the charge out of it. It does
Yeah,
lessen the any kind of negative charge that might be there.
exactly.
Gratitude does
And
that
you,
though.
well, yes, gratitude is a very high vibrational feeling energy. So yeah, I try to insert it as much as I possibly can into my life, recognizing that some days are more challenging than others. But
Hmm.
that's money is one that I'm really working hard at staying focused on and staying in that place of gratitude rather than fear or frustration, because that's when we end up going down that spiral of that leads to no place good.
Yeah, it's all very constricting at that point. I think for me, my personal practice the past month or so, what I've been really going through and listening to from Spirit is that waiting period. So for me, like waiting in between when clients are paying me, when I don't get an immediate, payment to an invoice or something like that, it would make me anxious. And I
Mm.
have now learned to become very comfortable in that waiting period because it doesn't mean that something's not working. It means it's percolating, it's brewing. It's just like planting a seed. You don't plant it and the next day go look for the plant to actually be sticking through the ground. The waiting
That's
is
right.
part of the process.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like being an entrepreneur is the training ground for getting comfortable with the flow of money and it not being a paycheck every other week like we were used to getting.
But
That
also
safety is what made it hard
recognizing,
to leave.
exactly, safety made it hard to leave, but that's why they call them golden handcuffs. That's a
Oh,
problem.
yes, totally.
But
Yes.
at the same time, the waiting period is it's part of the process of, yes, the money might not be there right away, but you also learn that, again, prosperity looks different. So just
Mhm.
because the money isn't in the bank account doesn't mean that when that person opens the door for you and shows you kindness, that's not also pouring into your bank account. That's your emotional bank account. You know, when someone calls you and says, "Hey, I'm going to the grocery store. Can I bring you anything?" That's abundance as well.
Absolutely.
It comes in different forms. And so for me, when I learned to expand my definition of prosperity and money to even acts of kindness, you look around and then you start to realize, oh, I'm wealthy now. There's richness around me in so many different forms, not just a dollar, not just
Mhm.
monetary. And I think
Mhm.
that's important, especially when you're an entrepreneur and it feels like there's some lack going on.
Yes, exactly. Which kind of full circle brings us back to the podcast title. It's when we shift our focus from being about money to being about meaning, it opens all these doors to so much prosperity that we never even realized existed. So, oh, this has been such a great conversation. So, if people feel called to reach out to you, how can they connect with you?
Yes, so I can give you the websites, but I can give you also the easiest one, the hub that has everything is niksallie.com, NIKSALLIE.com. And from there, you'll get to the other two websites. So tastemakerslegal.com and malachiteandmoon.com. So any trademark needs you have, come on over to the law firm. Anything that has to deal with executive coaching and spirituality for women, you come on over to Malachite Moon. And then on Instagram, it is I am Nik Sallie. And TikTok, if you want to see the shenanigans and the funny things over there, the account is Revenge Joy.
That's a great name. Awesome. Well,
Yes.
Nik, thank you again so much. This was such a beautiful, wonderful, inspiring conversation for me. I hope that others will benefit from it just as much. And really appreciate you being here with me.
Thank you for having me on and helping me to connect with other women who really want to be supported. I'm a girl's girl. So anytime I get to collaborate with someone like you, I'm just so happy. So thank you.